Hello, Jessica.
Hi.
Hello.
Trying to
And
get
hello,
everything
audience.
set before it starts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's all working. And so I'm glad we're starting this. And it looks like some of our audience is excited about this too.
Cool.
So we're talking about creating a new identity after escaping
Mhm.
Islam. And this is really
Mhm.
just to tell the audience, I think this is mostly Jessica talking, and I'm more learning like you guys are. So Jessica, what do you have to tell us about this?
Oh, well, I mean, I see a lot of it's just such an important question because our worldview creates our identity and it's intertwined. So when you uninstall your worldview programming, then you have to it completely it's like ripping out like there's the weft and the weave of like when you create like a textile. So you have the fibers that go up, the string that goes up, and you have the string that goes to the side to side.
Yeah.
So taking out your worldview is like taking out like the vertical strings of,
I like
let's
that
say.
analogy. Yes. It's like
So
a
when you
scaffolding infrastructure.
exactly the structure. So, then you have all these strings that like just collapse. So your identity collapses because there's no structure. So how we see the world is also how we see ourselves. And identity is an installed and programmed system. It's not innate. Your personality is different. Your personality is like a collection of behaviors that intertwine with your identity.
Connected for
And
sure.
your behaviors are often linked to your biochemistry and genetics and all that stuff. So when you decide to uninstall an entire worldview program, then you have to also uninstall your identity. And that's pretty much why people have a really hard time changing from one idea to another, because they can't handle the idea of even unconsciously any threats to their identity, which is their ego, essentially.
I'd like to say something about this before you continue,
Mhm.
please. So
Mhm.
you mentioned when people try to uninstall their worldview. Well,
Mhm.
first of all, I want to say, oh, I think I heard an echo. I don't know how that's happening. Anyway, if it
Do you want
happens
to?
later, we'll have to think about it. But
I
um,
can try like my headphones.
I don't know. I don't know.
It might screw things up. I
I
don't
don't
know.
know.
Let's see.
Then I don't know why I don't need one. Then I know the AP uses one, and so does his guy Dave. Anyway, I wanted to say, when you try to uninstall your worldview, first of all, I think a big chunk of your worldview is unstated, unquestioned assumptions that you don't know you have.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if somebody was to say, "I'm uninstalling my worldview. I don't believe in God anymore," that's like similar to what you said. That's one piece of a scaffolding, and 95% of it is like a what do they call those little piece of ice
Pyramid?
in the water?
Iceberg. I was literally thinking
An
iceberg too.
iceberg. Yeah, an
Can you
iceberg.
hear me?
They're looking at
I-
the top of the iceberg above the water as their God belief and some beliefs that they know of in words that they can repeat. But the stuff under, which is 95% of it,
Yeah.
unquestioned, unstated, they don't even know they have it. Some of it they got in their head when they're like 2 years old. So it's very difficult to try to uninstall your worldview. And I'm not even sure there really is a way. What you have to do is one idea at a time, replace it with something else you like
Mm-hmm.
better. I don't think you can just get rid of it. I don't think you can just get rid of, I don't believe in God anymore, and that's it. There's nothing to replace it. Maybe that's what people's problem is that they're trying to do that.
Yeah, can you hear me, by the way?
I'm not hearing you. Now I hear you, I think. No, I still don't hear you. Oh, you have yourself muted.
I didn't fucking mute myself.
You had yourself muted, but right now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. You
Okay.
just had yourself muted. I'm not sure.
All right. So if there's an echo, I can try again with the headphones. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So actually, the iceberg is a great analogy. It's really great because you know, there's the conscious part, which is all of the mythologies and stories that we believe about the world and God, like the divine. If you believe in the divine, that's a story, and then how those stories interact to create our ideas and stories about ourselves and how we relate to the world. But those create unconscious programming that we're not even aware of. Like there are a lot of people who, and I'll just use this as an example. A lot of guys who are, and I've heard this from other Muslim guys. I haven't personally experienced this, although I've seen it, but it's more so like something that's related to me by other ex-Muslims when they're talking about other ex-Muslim men. They retain the misogyny and they retain the programming around the role of woman as subject, servant, an object of like their pleasure and progeny. And
I don't, and for a lot of them, I don't think they know they have these ideas.
That's the unconscious thing, right? So
No.
they've been programmed with it by the religion. But when they leave the religion, they don't leave all of their programming. They still retain the identity of male supremacy. So that was created by the religion.
But I would say it's more than just the religion, though, because I just make a clarification for a lot of people maybe who aren't in any of this Islam stuff. The Islamic religion started from Arab culture. Arab culture already had the misogyny in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then Islam was born from this, so it had the misogyny with it. And then 1400 years later, it spread everywhere, and the misogyny is still there. But I really think, you know, think of each family as its own little culture. There's some families in the Islamic world that are a lot more liberal,
Mm-hmm.
and they have a lot less of the misogyny. And other families are on the other end of the scale, a lot more misogynistic, not very liberal. My family was one of these. I hear stories from my mom about her dad, and he was the kind of guy that said, and you can tell the misogyny in it, but you could tell also the reverse misogyny. He would say to his daughters, he had 3 daughters. He would say to his daughters, "You guys are all men. You have a penis." It's a weird way to say it. It's saying you're equal to a man, but it's also making it sound like the man is better anyway by saying comparing to the man. Like you don't need to compare to the man. But,
yeah. I mean, that's interesting. It fits within I don't know why my camera is shaking so much. It fits within the context. It's a great way of communicating it within the context. My dad said, there's no one above you and there's no one below you, which is kind of the same as what was it, your grandfather or your father?
My grandfather on my mother's side, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So that's what he was communicating, even though it's like you're at the highest. There's a hierarchy. My dad was like, there's no hierarchy. It's an illusion. And that's how I feel. But like recognizing that there is a hierarchy and saying, you know, you're not lower than the people at the top is like a similar communication. So
another dynamic that I think my grandfather didn't have, I'm pretty sure he sort of bought into and never rejected the hierarchy between adult and child.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the whole world is basically adults are better than children, and they don't say those words. They say words like, let's say a child is sort of demanding respect. There's a lot of adults that say, well, you're just a child. You don't matter yet. You'll matter later, when you're older, and when you're an adult.
Yeah.
You know, there's a saying in the Arab culture. They probably have one in the West too. I don't know. Something like, you should be seen but not heard to the children.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And another little, and then it's not just the words that they say. The actions are, like my mother would tell me, when guests would come over, the idea was the adults would sit in the room talking to each other. The children should be away in another room. Just get out of our way while we're doing our adult business. That's another hierarchy that shouldn't exist.
Yeah.
And it's not just the Arab world or Islamic world. The West does it too. I think they're better here a little bit, but it's still bad.
The whole
It's very
world. Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Yeah, the whole world does. By the way, can you hear me? Okay, everything's working.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay,
Yeah.
because I was clicking around trying to figure out YouTube to see if there's anything going on YouTube and if there's any comments or anything. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Can you see the comments, or is it only showing on my end?
There, I just saw a comment come in on StreamYard.
Okay, so you can see them too.
Yeah, and I feel like maybe I should share the StreamYard link. I shared my YouTube link because I can't tell if anyone's trying to communicate with me from my community.
I think if somebody types in your YouTube comments, it will show up here. I think.
Okay.
I think so. I think that's how they designed it. I'm not sure.
Okay, good. I hope so. Great.
I'm still very new to this. So the only reason I posted this comment is I don't really understand it. I thought maybe you might understand it. I don't know if this was related to what we were saying.
Ticophobia? I'm not sure what that means. Maybe the poster could elaborate.
Yeah. Riyasat, if you can further explain what you're saying, please let us know. Okay.
Yeah. So, okay, where were we? Sorry.
Not dear, but fear. So this was fear.
Oh, yeah. Fear of hair.
Fear of hair? Fear of hair.
Yeah. I mean, the deep Islamic programming is that women's bodies are like sources of evil, temptation, sin, like everything that's bad. And that's one of the things I wanted to talk about too, as far as, and we don't,
sorry, I'm randomly putting these comments and might interrupt.
Okay. So, well, anyway, welcome everybody. I'm so glad to see there's people here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fear of hair. Yeah. They're afraid of women's hair. They think women's hair is going to send them to hell. So they need to
I don't understand that. What? Because the hair is beautiful?
Hijab,
is that what it is?
Hijab, it's like if you show one hair.
Oh, so they're kind of creating new ideas sort of from the spirit of the logic of Islam.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not really in Islam. Yeah.
I mean, it is in the sense that women have to cover their hair and everything.
Yeah. The unconscious part.
Yeah.
Like Islam is misogynistic, but it doesn't market itself. Hey, I'm misogynistic.
No, for sure. It does have things in it that make it palatable to women in the context of like a lawless society. So what I was going to say is, and actually one of the things about talking about this, when we're talking about creating a new identity after escaping Islam, it's important to understand what creates identity in the first place and why you're in an experience, you're having an experience of feeling a lack of identity. And then to also understand the kind of deeper programming that is going to still be there that continues to limit your experience and your sovereignty as a human being. Because one of the great things about being human that you can realize once you deprogram is that you can program anything you want. You can. And
here's the thing: you programmed yourself in the first place.
What's that?
Because of the fact that you programmed yourself your whole life from birth.
Kind of.
That means you can reprogram yourself continuously.
Yeah. Well, exactly. So. Yeah. In the beginning, we're programmed by society, but we don't start with the idea I'm a Muslim. I don't start with the idea of I'm a man or a woman. I obviously never had that idea that I'm a man, although that's a different story. Yeah. But anyway,
you don't know what gender is yet. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no concept of it, right? So you don't have an identity of whiteness or anything. I didn't even know what that was until I was older. I think I was 13 or something like that. And so it's there's the self and then there's the other. And anyway, so I wanted to just start with kind of presenting an understanding of what identity is, how it's created, where it comes from, and the effects that it has on you, even after
you leave an ideological system, it's still going to leave threads that affect who you are and how you interact with the world. So that's why a lot of Muslim men, when they leave and become like atheist, they think, oh, there are no rules. Well, I mean, there are consequences. Like, you can jump off a cliff and you can't mindset your way into flying. You're going to land at the bottom and break your fucking neck. Excuse my language. Like, there are consequences. If you objectify other people, you objectify yourself and you lose the ability to connect. So then when you can't connect, you can't empathize. And exactly, this person says, one isn't born, but rather becomes a woman. Exactly. And there's a creator on TikTok named Lizzie B. She's amazing. Oh, I need to like get her actual quote, because I just found this quote. Masculinity is defined by it's defined by femininity. She said it so much better, but like, it's defined by the not being feminine, which in feminine is defined as everything that's inferior to the masculine. So it's like imagining that here is anything that's masculine and here's everything that's feminine. If there's any slip from this superior position, then there's a feeling of emasculation, because masculinity is defined by the superiority to women, to femininity.
At least by the traditional way of thinking about things.
Right, exactly. And
going
that
back however many centuries or millennia.
Yeah, millennia. So it started around like the early Bronze Age, late Copper Age. And it started especially with the advent of agriculture and settled communities that produced surplus, and then people got to the top, like would start rising to the top and hoarding the resources that the community produced. So there are the people who hoard the resources and there are people who produce the resources. So there's hoarders and producers, and they created a spiritual system that reflects that hierarchy of the people who serve and the people who receive that service or that production, who have power. And that's where the Abrahamic gods came from. God. Like, it's a centralized hierarchical system with a male at the top. The concept is the male supremacy. And that's what creates hierarchy. That's the foundation of the hierarchy, which predates Islam and even Abrahamic religions, but that's the evolution. And that's where we are today. Whether or not you're religious, you're probably going to have, even as a woman, you're going to have aspects of this hierarchy, which puts males and white people, rich people, straight people, beautiful people at the top. So even in Genesis, there's a book, like it says, in Genesis, it says, God split the heaven and the earth. That's literally saying the binary was created of hierarchy of good, evil, masculine, feminine, sacred, profane, divine, or like heaven, hell. It's this strict hierarchy, this strict binary. And that's the symbolic system that we have today. Before in like the Copper Age and before, we didn't have that. There were, and even up until like places in like Europe until the Middle Ages, they would still have pantheons in like Northern Europe and stuff, like Norse, Celtic, a lot of the pagan gods and goddesses and stuff. They didn't have that strict hierarchy, that strict binary of heaven, hell, right, wrong, good, evil, white, dark, black, light, dark, day, night, whatever, So that's the binary that really controls our thinking and is the foundational programming that we use.
I think
so
another set of words people use is they try to say, hey, the world is not black and white.
Exactly.
There's a lot of gray.
Yeah. I mean, it's a rainbow. It's a spectrum,
rainbow, yeah.
And so, queer ideas and theologies and philosophies are really interesting. And so I think even if you don't identify as like, queer in the sense that you have, well, queer doesn't necessarily mean, and I don't know much about, like, I can't really speak for it. I'm not somebody that, yeah. So Kat says that polytheist societies were capable of being very misogynist. Yeah. So, and also especially after the Copper Age and like after the end of the Copper Age, for sure.
Well,
Yeah,
I think our whole society was very sort of easily going towards misogyny,
right.
simply
So
because
Mhm.
men use physical force to subdue women, just
Mhm.
like bigger men will. And I'm not saying everyone. Bigger men will subdue smaller men with physical force. And I guess in the absence of morality, maybe that's all that's happening is might makes right.
It can, although it's not a very effective long-term strategy. So, one of the reasons why humans were so effective and survived for so long is cooperation, and that even Darwin says that. Like, and it's just like there's no confusion about that there in scientific circles. Like, this idea that the survival of the fittest is really just like capitalists plucking this idea out of Darwin's ideas and then promoting this to, again,
They were cheating.
legitimize their own power
Yes.
structure, which has them at the top.
Yes. The
So
proper way of human relationships is mutual
aid,
mutual respect, mutual benefit relationships, interactions, rather than the opposite being this is the way the other people think. In any human interaction, one person has to be the master or the winner and gets what they want, and the other person has to be the loser, the subdued ones, and the one that doesn't get what they want. And their logic is you can't all get what you want. And
right,
parents say that to children.
What?
Parents say that to children, right?
Wait, what
you
did you
can't
say?
always get what you want.
Yeah.
They're lying. And they're saying that only in cases when they don't want to give the child what they want and in that moment.
Yeah.
And they're training unconsciously the child to develop this worldview and identity that says there's winners and losers, and either you're gonna sacrifice other people to get what you want, or you're gonna sacrifice yourself to let other people have what they want, which is all wrong logic.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, if you look at indigenous societies, there around the world, there is a very deep morality that doesn't have this like strict binary between the conceptualization of black, white, or like in hierarchy of like the polarities, you know. So, and yeah, like polytheistic societies can be and have been misogynistic. I didn't say that they weren't, but if you look at the evolution of human society and like religion, spirituality, you will see that the egalitarianism started ending around the end of the Copper Age. Like in places like the Iberian Peninsula, it changes everywhere. It's different everywhere. And you still have like egalitarian societies in pockets of the world, like in the mountains of, I think, southern Yunnan province or something like southern China, northern Vietnam, and like between, in the mountains between Southeast Asia and East Asia, I think there are still pockets there, and there's others around. Why they didn't survive, I mean, it's competition. I mean, there's competition is a very important part, and things happen the way that they're supposed to happen, I guess, in some ways, because they can't happen any other way. But now that we are literally facing extinction because of the way that we operate and the way that we're programmed collectively around the world, even if you don't believe in the idea that men are superior to women, and white people are superior to black people, etc., or people of color. You know, there are a lot of other ways in which that programming is still there, like the devaluing or deprioritizing the environment, just ignoring it and not connecting with it, as if it's as if it's an external object.
I think a lot of those people. I think a lot of those people who are doing things while destroying the environment in really bad ways, like big companies, the way they do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of them maybe recognize they're ruining the environment, but they're thinking, it's not my problem. It'll really harm people 2 or 3 generations from now.
Well, and also yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so they're just kind of only caring about themselves right now.
I mean, big companies or individuals. If you buy from Shein, if you buy fast fashion, if you buy clothing that you don't plan to wear for 5 to 10 years, what are you going to do? Like, you're using resources and then you're going to throw it away. Like, you're using single-use products. Like, you know, you are not
so in a sense, we're
better than the corporation.
I think what you're saying, in a small scale,
yeah,
a lot of people in the West are doing some damage. It is smaller than big companies, but when it's all of us doing it,
if people could do it on a big scale, they would. If they would do it on a small scale, they will do it on a big scale. The only limit is your power and reach. So, I mean, they can think they're better. They're not. It's everyone wants to point a finger at, oh, they're doing such a bad thing. Well, look at yourself. Why do these corporations sell so much? It's because
we're buying it.
You buy it.
Yes.
You know, you want it. That's what you want. Yeah. You're creating demand for it. So, you know, I mean,
every time you buy something, you are contributing to that company making it again.
Yep. And the consumption and everything, the structure, like in slavery, for example, everyone's anti-slavery, but not for their clothes, not for their products, not for their phones.
Yeah, and a lot of what they do is
exactly.
A lot of what
100
they do
pennies is $1 and it adds up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of what they do is intentionally avoid finding out.
Yeah, as if they're not having the same impact,
so that they don't feel bad about knowing that they're doing it.
And that also ties into, again, the value system of the hierarchy of white. People of color, like this, you know, and it goes down to like white to black, and then people of color kind of in the middle. You know, brown skin is less valued. So if brown people are enslaved, it doesn't matter as much. If white people are enslaved, oh my God, it's a fucking world tragedy. But there's like 1 billion. Well, actually, there's like, I think it's like tens of millions, maybe like 50 or more million people in slavery today. 75% of those are women and girls, 75%, and most of them in sex slavery. I've been, that's a whole other story, but like for me, but yeah. And it's, why are they still slaves, even though and the entire world hates slavery? Because we value, again, the hierarchy of value puts those people at the bottom. So their suffering just isn't that important. We just don't care as much. Like, oh yeah, that's too bad, but I really like my, you know, my cute shirt, you know?
So I want to ask about identity. What I want to ask is, what are people thinking when they even think they have a problem with identity? Like, what caused it in the first place? I noticed a question somebody asked in the ex-Muslim subreddit. Mm-hmm. They said, so I'm an ex-Muslim now. Am I first an atheist or first an ex-Muslim and second an atheist? The only question I thought was, why does that matter? What does that even mean? When would you use that information? Mm-hmm. And I tried to put myself in their shoes. Well, I could see where, if somebody in the community comes and asks me, hey, what are you? Like, what is your religion? Mm-hmm. And if I don't have a readily available answer, I think those people are the ones that are searching for an answer to have. Now, mm-hmm. I'll say what I noticed in America is nobody asks you that question. But I found out that in the rest of the world, not all of it, obviously, but in some parts, it matters a lot. They want to know, hey, what is your religion?
Yeah, here it's more politics. Like, you know, you kind of, they
what
want
is
to
your
know
politics?
what your allegiance is, like what community you're in. So, I mean,
And that is another hierarchy thing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm, yeah, and it's self and other. It's like, are you my in group or are you the out group? Do I identify with you, or are you like an opponent? There's
And then they
self and other.
And then they operate, you know, once they find out, let's say, I'll give you an example. Okay. So my mother was in Las Vegas. She was in this little the resort type area in this room watching TV, about to have breakfast. There's another woman right over there in another table. TV turns on and it's, I don't know, something about politics, Trump or Clinton, something.
Mm-hmm.
And the woman said, "Are you a Clinton supporter?" And then the entire interaction after that was just that woman treating my mom in a certain way based on what she supposedly believed about this one little thing, who you voted for. And that's going to paint everything about. So basically, I only think about you in one way, whether or not you support a person, and then everything else is colored by that.
Yeah.
That makes no sense to me.
Yeah, and that's another function of identity, right? There's the self and the in-group, and then the other. And that's it's another thing. That's finding your community, establishing your community is one of the hardest parts of identity, or recreating your identity after losing it, because it's like, well, okay, I was Muslim. My people are Muslims, or they're Sunnis, or they're Sufis, or they're Shia, or whatever.
Many levels, yes.
Yeah, right. Or Salafi, or whatever. But when you
then which
leave
country
that,
you're from, and then
it's like, who are my people? Who am I? You know, the aloneness, the isolation is really hard. So, and part of building up a new relationship with self is creating a new relationship with the other, because it's like there's this like, you know, I call it the super self, which is basically a projection of the best qualities of the concept of self. So like God is like Allah is a projection of all that's good and wonderful, and you know, that we strive for, or whatever, if you're a Muslim. And then outside of this structure of like the individual and then the super self, which is the divine or the God or whatever, you have outside of that is the other. And the other also helps you define, because if like, what am I it's helpful to know what I am not. I am not a man. I am not English. Well, I'm like kind of English, but like, you know, I'm American. I'm not Chinese, you know? So that helps me understand what I am is what I am not. I am not, people are like, well, I am not poor. And maybe I am, but like, this has nothing to do with me here, but like, not being poor is really important to one's identity sometimes. And that's why they would buy the Louis Vuitton, even if they can't afford it, because they're trying to establish their identity. They're affirming their identity as like closer to the top of the hierarchy.
So I want to mention something you said and talk about a danger. You said people want to know, like the reason identity matters partly for these people is they want to know what group they're in.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with that is, and I think the way people are seeing this is, so for example, let's say I'm a Muslim, therefore I think like other Muslims, or I'm an American, therefore I have these particular values. But that is incorrect. No matter what group you put me in, or I put myself in, I do not act like exactly the same as the other people in that group. There's not really a link there. It's a very loose link.
Yeah, those
as an example,
labels, right?
Yeah, as an example, after leaving Islam, okay, so you could say I'm in the group called atheists, and in another group called ex-Muslims. And then what Muslims will do there is, oh, so when they're trying to argue about religious arguments, a lot of Muslims will first say, okay, well, tell me what group you're in. I have an argument for that. So then I'll say, well, I don't need to tell you what group I'm in. It doesn't matter. Tell me your logic. So then after some more talking, I say, fine, I'll tell you, I'm an atheist. And then they'll say their argument. But they got confused because they assumed that because I'm an atheist, I have particular conceptions of whatever arguments he's going against. One very specific one that you'll hear a lot is, well, you're an atheist, therefore you cannot believe that morality is objective. And then I'll say, well, no, I'm not in the same boat that you're thinking of. Or they'll say, we're all materialists. No, I'm not a materialist. I am an atheist, but I'm not a materialist. So all this identity, well, I don't know about identity in particular, but if we just say I'm in a group, that doesn't mean anything. So I worry that people are trying to shove themselves in groups.
Yeah, so I do think it does have it has ramifications. So in the sense that in a practical sense, it has meaning. In an absolute sense, it has no meaning. Like, what does white mean? It means literally nothing. Like, it is not a real thing. It's not a real thing. It is a made up construct. But
or maybe it's a real thing, but it's not a thing that matters.
It does have a real impact on how reality stands, how I interact in the world, how people interact with me. So, and so part of what I've had to do myself is deconstruct my identity as a white person, as white. And unless I deconstruct my identity as white, I am still fully and firmly within the false hierarchy that is part of the destruction of the world and people. So, anyway, but you brought up before, and right when you said, like, let's kind of pivot back into talking specifically about identity and recreating identity after leaving Islam, because we did get into some very much more philosophical and esoteric stuff, which I love. It's my little spot.
You're going to have to understand things in general about identity before you can use that logic
conceptually. Understanding how it's created, the implications and ramifications for your life and the people around you, and also understanding the limitations of our concepts is going to help a person realize, okay, I can step away from believing that even identity is real. It's not really real, because in the sense that your body is real. Your body is your body. There's not a lot you can do to change what it is. Like, you can eat better, you can be healthy, you can change your mindset, and have different outcomes behaviorally, but your body is your body. And that's real. My identity as Jessica isn't real in any real sense, because first of all, I could change it at any time, except for what you were talking about before, those labels of ex-Muslim or atheist or whatever, those labels. And you said they have no meaning, I think, and they don't, but they are part of a, how to picture it. It's like, I can't escape the identity that people project onto me. Woman, white, American, I can't escape those. Even if I don't identify as what you consider a woman, that's not something I identify as. And I'm not talking about my identity here. I'm not because that's not the question, but I don't identify as white, but am I white? To other people, yes. I don't believe in whiteness in the sense that I don't believe it's a real thing. But people have all of these labels, these demographic labels that they categorize you with when they meet you, and then they slot you into a place conceptually within the social hierarchy and interact with you based on that matrix. It's like an algorithm of and
then they do it to
creating
themselves.
A number that's that's your value,
And they do it to themselves is the problem. These
yeah.
people that are having this trouble,
yeah,
it's that they're doing this kind of logic about themselves. And there shouldn't be. Like, why do I need any labels at all? Why do I need any labels at all? If I was to meet a new person and the first time we meet and say, okay, now let's exchange labels. Tell me all your labels.
Exactly.
I'll tell you all my labels, and then we'll see how we interact. It shouldn't matter at all. I think people should do what Bruce Lee said in an interview. He was asked. He goes. The interviewer said something like, "Okay, so you came from China. You're here now.
Yeah.
Do you see yourself as a Chinaman or a North American?" And Bruce Lee said, "I see myself as a human being. We are all one family."
Yeah.
So his identity that he chose is human. That makes a lot more sense than I'm a Syrian guy who's an American guy, and I was a Muslim, and now I'm human. That's it. And really, you could go more broad than human, especially when if we meet aliens, and if we invent, if we start having artificial intelligence that are kind of like humans.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're more like just intelligent beings.
Yeah,
We even need to attach to a biological body.
Yeah, I mean, you can even identify with nature. Like you can realize that we're not separate from nature. All of our
we're stardust.
All one, even with the earth. I don't identify as separate from nature. I'm not.
Yes, we are cousins of the stars.
What's that?
We are cousins of the stars.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't.
We are stardust.
Into that, but I mean, we have star components in our blood. Like there's nothing. What does separation even really mean when if there's an environmental catastrophe and we all die and everything dies, because we're all connected to that environment that we're in. So thank you.
So that's my mother, Ragad.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. So I for example, somebody on Atheist Reddit was like, aren't you guys afraid to die? And what makes it so, how do you become not afraid to die? And I replied that, fall in love with the soil, fall in love with the earth and the sea and the mountains, and, fall in love with nature. And then when you return to the earth, you're returning to your beloved, and you're returning to yourself. This idea that we have self-consciousness is another thing that makes us feel like we're separate and lonely, and when in fact that's an illusion too. I
wonder if part of this problem that people have with identity is also related to, and I'm pretty sure it is, because I think you just brought it up. When people are grew up their whole lives in a religion, their purpose was already chosen for them. Okay.
They're handed a script. You're handed a script at birth.
Which is what your purpose of your life is. And really, it's bigger than that.
Category of labels that they have assigned to you.
And then, so if you leave your religion, and if you cared about those things, now you're also thinking, well, now what's my purpose?
Yeah. Well,
what is my purpose in relation to the universe?
Yeah, exactly. And
now, why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? I feel like I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And a lot of what people are doing in like day-to-day stuff is take a shower, go to work, come back home, get ready, tomorrow go to work. And that's maybe not very fulfilling.
Right.
That life, absent of that religion they had, is not fulfilling.
Yeah, or what they end up doing is kind of like endless consumption and trying to feed their ego to try to establish power in this vacuum of, or not vacuum, but in this kind of essentially chaotic reality that is society. Like Muslim men was my example before of now there are no rules, but they're still affirming their masculinity by abusing women sexually and mentally and emotionally, because that makes them feel powerful. So that's their purpose. That's what gives them purpose, is kind of like the abuse of women, because it affirms their masculinity, their identity as a man. But the purpose, so what you're saying about purpose is really important. When you're recreating your identity, you get to ask yourself what's meaningful to you, instead of the way that it was, in that you are subject to the tyranny of society's projections onto you about who you are and what that means. You become sovereign, or you don't, and you just continue to choose not to be sovereign. But you can choose now sovereignty, because you're like, okay, I am aware now that I have the power to determine who I am, what the world is, and how I'm going to interact with it.
What I would say about that is you're sovereign to the extent that you uncovered those unstated and hidden assumptions that are in your head.
The more
and
you do,
change-
the more sovereign you are.
and change them to the things that you want and agree
Exactly.
with.
Exactly. That's what.
Then
That's
you're
the level-
sovereign.
Yep. Exactly. That awareness and then the action on it, and it's a continual process. I'm continually deprogramming myself and becoming aware. Oh wow, I didn't realize. Okay, yeah, that too. And usually, the best way to do that is to see through the eyes of people who are below you on the hierarchy, because they're going to see things that you're unconscious to. So listening to Black women, listening to queer Black women, has been one of the most enlightening and empowering and liberating things I've ever done, in order to understand what I hold unconsciously within me that's holding me back from becoming the most free and sovereign and liberated. And in my opinion, for what I value, like, I don't believe in the hierarchy as a real thing. I think it's very destructive, and it is literally threatening human life on Earth. And it's an existential threat. The threat now is not any other human being. The threat now is not pollution.
It's ideas in the ether.
This collective programming that we have, that some people are more valuable than others. And some things are more valuable than others. Some people, and like humans, are more valuable than the environment. Human needs and greed and lusts are more important than the people that we need to fulfill them, or the earth, or whatever. That idea, that basically is a meme, which if you read Richard Dawkins, I think he coined that term. It's a self-replicating idea, is a meme.
Yeah, I would tell people, you just brought up memes. I would tell people, if you're having trouble with identity or whatever, and all the things that we're talking about, I think it would be helpful if you learned meme theory. It helps you understand how ideas evolved, not just recently or whatever you learned from your parents. I'm talking about stuff that goes back thousands of years.
Yeah.
You are a host. Your mom was a host. Their mom was a host. We're just hosts, in a sense. We're just hosts. This is just a cubicle of ideas that have been evolving thousands of years.
Yeah.
And so I guess part of the advice there is to learn from the history of ideas going back.
Exactly.
You know, don't just to listen to authors that wrote books in the last 5 years. You got to look 30 years ago, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, including some of the stories in the Bible. And I guess maybe there's some, theoretically, there's good stuff in the Quran. I don't know.
You haven't read it? No, just kidding.
Actually, I've read some of it. Yeah, when I was a Muslim, I read some of it. I stopped reading afterwards, but yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I want to tell people, and I think this is implied by everything we've said so far, you don't need an identity. Or let me say it another way. I think when people think about identity, they're thinking of something static.
Labels too. Labels.
A static thing, a static set of labels about you. But we're not static beings.
Right.
There's no one point.
Reality isn't static.
There's no one point in time where you could say, Jessica Artemisia. Am I saying that right? Artemisia.
It's a way to say it. I don't have a preference. Artemisia, Artemisia. I don't care. It's
as if saying that Jessica Artemisia today is one thing, a static or identity, and you were that a year ago, 5 years ago, 25 years ago, and when you were born, that makes no sense. You another way to think of it is whatever identity you are, you can choose a new one tomorrow, and it should just keep changing.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't have a struggle with changing it.
Yeah.
I think maybe what part of the identity crisis people are having is they have a static identity, and they don't know how to have a dynamic one.
Right.
You should have a dynamic identity. And that's like saying, you know, like, I think you brought this up a little bit, you know, you in a previous time, you said something like, you know, you don't want to put labels on God. And I think what you meant was something like, you know, well, the way I replied to you was, well, what we're doing here could just be, this is our journey, and people can go along with me on the journey. During the journey, you're flip-flopping labels. I add a new one, and then I get rid of it because I changed my mind. There's nothing wrong with changing your mind. You know,
and it's you have new information in every moment if you're willing to receive it. So you can adapt, and like your values and understandings can change over time. And that's one of the things I wanted to point out about recreating identity, is that you get to go into yourself and decide what you value. And for me, I value truth, whatever that is. It's not something that I say I have or I've attained, but it's something I value and seek.
You value seeking it.
I value seeking it, and I don't claim or pretend to have attained it or grasped it,
or like a perfect understanding of things, although you do
yeah,
have a good enough understanding of things.
It's continually evolving, and I think that as soon as you think you've grasped it, you've lost it. You've lost the plot completely, and
you're at least static now, and you're not improving.
Yeah, and you stop evolving and growing, and you can't attain any higher understanding once you feel like you've understood.
And there's whole fields.
That's one thing that I value. Let me just finish, because I've lost my thought a couple of times from things I wanted to say. But so with recreating identity, you get to start from kind of like as zero as you can get, and that zero might get more and more. And like I try to get to more and more zero, which is deconstructing. Oh, and another thing that you said about people getting lost in identity and stuff, it's because they're still within, even though they're outside of this religious identity, they're still within the hierarchy of like labels. So they're like, what are my labels now? You know, and it's like, you can just step out mentally from that whole construct. And it is no longer important to you what your labels are or what anyone else's labels are. And then you're free, and you can connect in deeper ways with reality. And you stop, honestly, like I am never lonely, ever. I stopped being lonely years ago. I get bored, but I don't get lonely because I don't see myself as separate from reality. And even though I spend long stretches of time alone, like I travel alone, I might see people that are my friends once a week for a couple of hours. And the rest of the time I am alone. And I love that because I can process. My brain is processing information, and I need silence.
People don't do that
process enough. But what's that?
I said people don't do that enough.
Yeah, processing is really important. Solitude is really important. Otherwise you just kind of get on like this unconscious, like, trajectory. But yeah, so I'm just explaining kind of like what my experience has been and how I've used my opportunities outside of leaving this identity, because I was lost and feeling empty when I left religion, because God, Allah, was my beloved. I was Sufi. So Ar-Rahman, the beloved, was my central. I was totally devoted, completely centered on service and love and worship of God. And this relationship that I had was the most, like really almost the only important thing in my life. And so when I left it, so some people are really afraid of hell. I was afraid of losing this relationship. It's like divorcing my husband who I love, but it just doesn't work anymore. It took me 3 years after I was like, ooh, this isn't working. This isn't going to work. It took me 3 years to finally be like, well, this doesn't work and I have to leave. But yeah, so God was the love of my life and I had to leave. So after that, I felt empty and everything was meaningless, because how can anything have meaning if it's all relative and there is no absolute meaning? And that's what I think a lot of people are drawn to religion for, is this need to have some absolute definition of meaning in the vast chaos of reality, which is just, and that's what people are afraid of. It's like there's this bubble of meaning and reality, and you can cling to that like an anchor in this storm outside of it of chaos that is always there. And that's what people are afraid of. And that's why they defend their reality so strongly, because the alternative is to be thrust into this chaos that they're not capable of navigating. So that's what I'm trying to help, is that like, I mean, I was kind of in that chaos before when I was an atheist, before I was Muslim, but I wasn't conscious. So when I left Islam, I was reacquainted with the chaos and had to take intentional measures to understand it and work with it. And so that's what I'm sharing here. So yeah, was there something you wanted to say? I saw you.
There's a couple of things I thought of saying. I don't know how relevant it is to this topic, but on the issue of your identity, the labels, and let's pick one of them. Belief in atheist versus I believe in Allah. Let's say. I noticed that there's people that they feel like they need to have an answer that they're 100% certain of. Otherwise, they feel uneasy. And I think people need to have a different conception, which is it's okay to not have an answer to the God question. And you can live your life without that answer, and you don't need it. And as proof of this, if you, at least in America, I don't know about a lot of other places, if you go get a job somewhere, in most places, I'm saying, I'm sure there's anomalies that don't work like this. You go get a job somewhere and you go through the interview, you get hired, you meet all the people, you like the job. It's possible you worked your entire time there and at no point did anyone know whether you believed in God or not. It didn't matter. Whether or not you believed in God didn't matter to any of those interactions. People need to have that in their head about themselves and about everything. It doesn't, a lot of questions are like that. It doesn't matter. Like, as another example, okay, let's say, are you a materialist or not? Well, first of all, I went periods not even knowing what that word is. Doesn't matter. It doesn't affect my life. Now maybe how I actually behaved and whether it was in a materialistic way, that could matter, but the label itself doesn't matter. Like materialism is, what is it? It's the kind of thing of like caring about having objects and phones and cool toys, and not caring about, I don't know, other things.
Yeah, there's two definitions of materialism. One is to love and prioritize material things, like status symbols, things of some consumption. And then there's also the idea that like only the material reality is real, and there's nothing outside of or beyond what we can perceive with the five senses or through our instruments. That's
so already you just exposed something. You exposed something, which is there's two different definitions for that word in the minds of people all over the world. So even if we were to say I'm a materialist and someone else heard that, it's still meaningless, because which definition are we talking about?
Yeah.
It wasn't stated.
Like, you have a lot of Khaliji people who are very materialistic, and yet they are not materialists because they believe in God, presumably. Like, that's what they believe they think, they claim, So do they believe in God? What is God even? You know what I mean? Like, what is belief? I mean, I sound like Jordan Peterson now. You got to figure, what is
No,
it?
but
What do these things mean,
No, that's an important question, though. It's important to ask and try to understand that kind of thing. What is a belief? Because if your mind is operating using that word belief, and you never questioned what that word means in your head,
or if you
that's
do
a problem.
actions that are opposed to that, like, and I think that's a Muslim concept too. It's like, do you believe in Allah if you are disobeying his commandments? It's like, you can't be a believer if, like, you're a thinker, you think about these things, but you don't believe them. I mean, so it's like, what does belief even mean? So,
and then I guess at face value, when people first thinking about the word belief or the concept behind it, I'm guessing they're thinking of only the conscious, stated beliefs rather than the other kind of beliefs, which you don't even know how to put in words, but they're definitely there in your head acting.
And the beliefs that are displayed through your actions, those are like your real beliefs. So, and I guess, and going back to the idea of recreating your identity, understanding what your real beliefs are, like, I no longer believe in, like, the idea of God that's been presented to me. Do I believe in the possibility of, like, a divine reality? What does even divine mean? Like, I don't know. I don't also care. I don't think if I needed to know, I would know. Do I believe in, like, the value of bees? I do. If bees were to die, all humans would die because there would be no food. So the world of bees and the bees living is important to me. So when you're trying to recreate your identity, you get to decide, you get to go inside yourself and start poking around and, like, revealing, who am I? What are my beliefs? What is my programming? Your programming is deeper than your beliefs, because your programming is what is going to dictate how you operate. And how you operate is going to dictate your experience of reality, because reality is going to react to you based on how you operate within it. So that goes to the point of, like, yeah, there are no rules, but there are consequences. Like, I can believe that clothing is irrelevant or isn't important. That doesn't mean I can go walk around someplace warm. That you don't really necessarily need clothes for any purpose besides just not being nude. I can go walk around Mexico nude. It would not go well for me, because there are consequences. There are consequences, whether we like them or not. And even, like,
there are nude beaches, but
there are, and if you don't even need to go to those places or do it in your home, so
without a camera.
Yeah, as long as you don't have, like, Alexa and, like, a ring light or, like, or whatever, nanny cams and stuff. But so if you're recreating your identity, because also it's like we have like, how long do you want to do these, by the way?
Minimum an hour and up to 2 hours if it's really getting deep or something. I say maximum 2 hours because I don't think I can handle more than that. I'm
hungry. I need to eat. I need to eat. I need to drink. I want to do. I have like a ton of other stuff to do today too.
In this particular case, I think we talked enough about identity. Do you have any last topics to mention?
Well, I want to just talk about it from a practical sense. So I think we talked enough about the conceptual, the background, the history, that kind of stuff. I want to get into just a little bit of time of something that people can be like, okay, I can go from this live stream and start applying it to practically to my life in a way that's helpful and meaningful and can have lifelong, a lifelong impact. So where do you start in a world? Where do you start creating meaning and creating your sense of self and identity in, meaning in chaos? identity within a hierarchy of symbols that are called labels that are attached to us, and a relationship with self and reality. So those are kind of the basics of what identity is. So you can start piece by piece. And one of the ways you can start that is just by looking at yourself and seeing who you are now, seeing the behaviors and patterns that you have, becoming conscious of them. That's really important. But even additionally, and I think this is even more important when you're trying to establish meaning in the world, is like, what's meaningful to you? Like, maybe something abstract isn't meaningful, but people's pain, I care about that. It doesn't need to have, God doesn't need to tell me shit about that. Like, if I see somebody in pain, that is not okay with me. If, if my dog is hurt, that's not okay with me. That's meaning. And you can start as simply as that. Or you can be like, well, and you don't have to be altruistic. Like, altruism is another type of programming. Some people are too altruistic to the point of self-sacrifice, and that's programming mostly for women. And then there are people who are not altruistic enough and have no empathy, don't give a shit or have any compassion for other people and only care about themselves, which is more of a masculine programming. And so, you can decide what your relationship is to that. But like, looking at all these things, determining what is meaningful to you, and meaning can be just like the emotions it gives you. Like, I feel good when I am connecting with family and friends. What's wrong with that being meaningful? One of the things that people say, there's this debate of like, so I was just having this conversation with somebody earlier, like a few days ago, about women having a purpose outside or inside the home. And I think there's a false dichotomy there, because I don't think women need to have a purpose beyond just loving and being loved. I literally don't think it has to be more important than that. You don't need to have, like, literally just raising kids and loving them and being with your sisters and your family and your friends and your uncles and your aunts and whatever, like, loving and being loved is enough. But with patriarchy, the trap is you are then going to be imprisoned, and all your autonomy, all your sovereignty, your whole identity is going to be taken away from you because you want to love and be loved. But if you don't accept this prison and the erasure of your identity and all your power, then you're going to be thrown to the wolves and you have to take care of yourself. And then you have to have like a career and everything. And it feels very unnatural because all you want to do is love and be loved. 10,000 years ago, that's all people were doing, is loving and being loved. Like, women were loving and being loved by their families and their children and, other people's children, their families' children, it was simple, and
that's probably why a lot of women.
What's that?
I was going to say that's probably why a lot of women go into jobs like nursing.
Mm-hmm. And also, some women don't want to do that. Some women want to be the priestess or the warrior. Like, women were as much part of the hunting and warrior classes and the ruling classes and the spiritual classes as the men were, like, up until like the late Copper Age. And even further into like the current history, or like even longer in like, Northern Europe and stuff, like Mesopotamia, the Greeks, like in the Mediterranean and like the Levant. That's kind of where this male supremacy at least in like, I'm not talking about further. I'm not talking about like the East, because I haven't studied the history there. I don't know, so I'm not going to just like project what my understanding of our history. And then also like in Native America and in America and the indigenous populations, I have no idea how their society evolved.
Or the thousands of tribes around the world that aren't connected with the rest of human civilization.
There are, yeah. And then
there's a lot of them. Who knows how they're functioning? Yeah.
Yeah. So So from a practical sense, like finding meaning, I was talking about the stages of disbelief, like the stages of grief, and the like nihilism, cynicism, anger, grief. Those are all a part of the deprogramming process, because yourself, who you are, is going to have experienced the pain of the unraveling of the fabric, right? That's a painful process. Unless you're experienced with it and you're like, okay, well, here we go again, you know, which is kind of like, for me, what my experience.
I'd like to summarize what I think I heard to help the audience too. One big thing you're saying is pay attention to what you care about and how your emotions are.
Yeah, just listen to your own feelings, you know.
And I think people were not doing that is the point. You were not listening to yourself.
You're letting other
people start listening to yourself.
Yeah, listen, get to know yourself, look inside yourself. What
let me ask
feels right, and not necessarily what feels good, because like, you know, masturbating to porn can feel good, but ultimately it doesn't, you know. And I'm not going to say porn is or masturbation is bad, like just blanket, but like, you know, it can have bad effects. So, you know, it can mean you can't as easily connect with or empathize or even have good real sex. Like you can't get it up in a real sexual scenario, or you start to like resent women or, you know, whatever, because the women that you're attracted to are porn-based aesthetics, and those people of those aesthetic aren't interested in you. So you start hating women. Like it's a whole slew of, again, consequences that you have to realize are going to exist whether or not you believe in rules or not. So paying attention to how you feel in a real sense, not just like, and understanding the difference, like the complexity of emotions and feelings and biological responses and stuff like that. Just getting to know yourself and, you know, what's meaningful to you, and then focus on that.
What about journaling? How would you tell people how journaling can help them in this?
Yeah. I think the more you can externalize your inner processes, the more you can become aware of them. One of the ways that I started becoming self-aware was having an anonymous Twitter account where I just like live stream.
Journaling to the whole world.
Consciousness. What's that?
You're journaling to the whole world.
Yeah, because I feel like for me, you know, having some feedback, or just like, to me, I was atheist at the time when I started, but like I was like speaking to reality, even though no one was listening except like 60 porn bots for like a year. And that was fine, you know? So, and that's all I wanted, you know, just speaking to reality and like kind of whispering into the storm. And it was just coming after a really, really difficult period where I was completely crushed and destroyed. And so I just kind of like needed to like rebuild and really process. So yeah, like that kind of thing can be helpful.
So that's journaling. What about therapy?
Therapy can be good. It can have limitations. You know, find the right therapist. Try to get to know what the
different how to do that?
Therapy models. I haven't found therapy to be super helpful. I know a lot of people do. Sometimes therapists will just let you talk, and it's a complete fucking waste of time. Sometimes
I guess that might be a waste of time if you don't already feel comfortable talking.
If you're trying to figure something out,
get you comfortable to talk, then maybe that works.
It can. So that, again, so like at the time I was being bullied a lot, and I was like, I haven't hurt anyone. I haven't done anything to anyone. I literally am just like being nice and friendly with everyone. Like, why am I being bullied so much? And so I'm like, okay, maybe there's something that I'm doing that I need to be aware of. So I went to this therapist, and like they didn't help me find any understanding whatsoever. Like I just talked, and they kind of blamed me, but like kind of just didn't say anything. They just sat there like a fucking idiot, and I wasted my time.
It's hard though. I want to defend therapists a little bit. It's hard to help somebody with these things. So maybe it's 50% of the time it doesn't work. 50% of the time it does work.
Yeah, so you can
maybe
do
that
it. You
50%
can try
is
it.
good enough.
Yeah, I mean, you can try it, but also get to know what their modality is. So you might try to research the modalities and decide what's right for you. Sometimes you're going to go there and they're just going to try to diagnose you and stick you with another fucking label, and then drug you. Like that's not going to help. So,
I caution against that. Yeah.
Yeah, it might be a good crutch. Like you might get some Lexapro to get you through the hard times. Like I'm not against, if you have ADHD, for example, like get some modafinil, even though it's off label. I fucking hate the other stuff, but whatever. You might have a lot of other issues that are tied into your feelings and experiences, like traumas and stuff that you need to unpack and become aware of, and that are affecting your health. Like, your physical body is a part of the process. You're not separate from it. Your mind isn't separate from your body. Where the fuck is your mind if it's not part of your body? Like that's a ridiculous concept. So, recognizing that you are a biological organism that is also a reality, that is your foundational identity. You can't escape your body unless you're dead. And so that's a place to start, is you are your body, and taking care of your body. And then just start, you could also start researching things that are meaning. So once you know what's meaningful to you, is truth meaningful, or is pleasure? Like you can be a hedonist. Hedonism is a philosophy. Dive into hedonism. There's a whole philosophy around it. And it doesn't necessarily mean there's a whole philosophy around it. There's like what, Roman or Greek? I don't remember. But whatever you're thinking about or interested in or want to know about, just like go explore it and find out what it means to you, process it yourself.
So that's actually something I wanted to bring up earlier and I forgot. When you're leaving a worldview, and a lot of these people that are having these troubles when they're leaving their worldview, you see them ask questions like, okay, so now should I be Christian? Should I be Hindu or whatever? And I can tell there's a flaw in their thinking, which is, look, you're looking at a menu as if there's only 4 items on it. The menu of worldviews you could select it, even if you just ask what it is today, it's in the thousands, and it doesn't stop. You could create a new one tomorrow. And the possible worldviews is infinity.
Yeah, exactly. And you can develop, instead of a fixed understanding with labels, which labels are more designed to separate yourself from other people, and to establish your place within the hierarchy and create your in-group where you belong, who your community is. And you can, instead of being focused on labels, you can develop a mode of having curiosity about the world and people around you and connection. That's an alternative to hierarchical thinking. So if you're going to try to just reestablish yourself in a new position within the hierarchy of society, you can do that. Just pick some labels and go for it. And you can pick the labels by researching them and deciding which ones you feel like apply to you. And that's fine. I don't recommend that. I think that's a waste of your sovereignty. And, you're just becoming another automaton within the destruction of humanity in the world. And if that's your choice, that's totally up to you. Like, whatever. I'm just offering an alternative way to perceive self, other, and a relationship with self and other. And that's to approach it with curiosity, to understand, rather than a desire to categorize in a system of something to compete with or to push down or to identify with. Like often when we're establishing identity, it's about like not just what am I, but also where am I in the hierarchy. So yeah, so those are things to consider. But at the end of the day, you are in a position that is pretty much one of the best positions you could ever be in, and that is at the doorway to freedom. Most people never reach that. They never have the courage to like uninstall their programming because of what you're now experiencing, which is, you know, maybe loneliness, emptiness, anger, despair, cynicism, nihilism, and all kinds of other really terrible feelings. But you had the courage and did it anyway. And now you're in the void and you get to create whatever you want from yourself in your life. So
something you said earlier, I just remembered, and I don't know if this is connected to the identity issue. Maybe it is. You mentioned altruism, and there are a lot of people who think we're supposed to be altruists. We're supposed to sacrifice for other people. And I'm very specifically remembering ex-Muslims saying that they refuse to leave their family because they want to sacrifice for their family. But their family, in this particular case of this person saying it, they're very bad people. They're narcissists, and they're doing the opposite of altruism. They're saying they're basically telling that person, "Hey, you sacrifice for us," which is opposite of altruism.
Yeah, they've been programmed to be the source, the producer, the one who produces in the hierarchy rather than.
And I think women get this ingrained in their brains more than men do, at least in the Arabic world and Muslim world. This idea that the woman needs to stay and continue helping the family. I did notice men also say it. I remember seeing this ex-Muslim man saying he disconnected a lot from his family, but he still takes care of them. He still financially supports them, and he still does things like gets groceries for his old dad. But he does this thing where he separates from them, you know, and he described what he does, and I knew what it meant. It's this thing, and if you look at narcissism terminology, there's this word in there they use, which is called gray rocking. And gray rocking is this thing you do where when you recognize someone is being a narcissist toward you, and let's say you can't disconnect from them fully, like completely getting away, then what you do is you gray rock them, which means you minimize how much you're interacting with them so that you prevent them, you don't give them means to harm you. So as a small example, you know, if I normally would say to my family, "Hey, I'm doing this fun thing," you know, tell them about what's going on in your life. Well, now you don't do that. You don't give them ammo. So yeah, the whole altruism thing and it sort of controlling you after you leave Islam, the altruism thing is connected to identity, you know. And
I'm a good person because there's good and bad. There's good and evil. I'm a good person. That's an identity. And what does good mean? That is what you strive to be. Well, what does evil mean? What does bad mean? Sometimes bad or evil, being angry is considered evil for a lot of, it's like, actually it's considered the only emotion men are allowed to have. It's like you're it's like you're strong, you're aggressive, you know. It's good for men, but anger is kind of taboo for women. Women can't express our anger as easily or in a sense accepted. So anger, I'll just finish really quickly. Like rage, women's rage, female rage. It's kind of like a topic right now. There's nothing evil about that. But a lot of women are conditioned to believe that if they get angry, there's something dangerous and wrong and evil about that. So they have to be accepting and compassionate and forgiving at the expense of themselves. But why because that enables the person in power to extract more from them. So they continue in their role as a producer more effectively in the hierarchy. So anger would enable them to realize, I am being hurt, and the anger would allow them to have the fuel and the
assert themselves.
power and the motivation to do something to protect themselves.
Yes.
And that's why anger is taboo and evil and bad for people in a lower position on the hierarchy.
Yes. So the point is, society, and I mean most of it, or almost all of it, society, what's the word I'm looking for? Says bad things about women who would get angry, but they don't do that for men. And if anything, they see it as a good thing in men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they see it as a bad thing in women, which is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a good thing, it's a good thing for everyone.
Right. Exactly. What's good for the goose is good for the gander, or whatever. In reverse for sadness. So sadness, yep, exactly. Women are labeled as a bitch or like bitter, you know, and yeah, exactly. So so with sadness, women are allowed to feel sad. Men are not.
In the sense that we get made fun of.
Exactly, because it's a feminine
by other
thing.
men. By
It's a
other men,
feminine
maybe
thing.
not by women mostly, but by other men.
There are men who claim that women do that. And there probably are, because women are very much programmed by the Matrix too.
There's women doing it. I actually got a little bit when I remember when I was a teenager, and there was this woman right next to me who said something about fixing tires, and I was like, I don't know how to fix tires, and she's like, why? And she had this face. Why? Why don't you know how to fix tires? You're a man.
Oh wow. Yeah.
I was getting a degree in physics.
Right.
I'm not working on that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So women are very much programmed by the matrix of hierarchy and masculinity and whatnot too. So anger is considered a powerful emotion. That's why it's relegated to men up here. And sadness is considered a weak emotion. So if it's expressed by a masculine man, that emasculates him. He starts to blend in with the feminine, and then that is evil. So any blending between the like a woman feeling anger or a man feeling sadness, that is taboo, because it doesn't reflect the hierarchy.
I'd like to do another episode kind of just on that last topic we just brought up. But right now, I really got to go. I got to go check on my food.
Yeah. Okay, good. I've got a mosquito that's like trying to become my friend, and I'm going to kill him. So.
Okay, so we'll see each other next week then, okay?
All right, sounds good.
All right, thank you.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye. Thank you for inviting me here.
Yeah, and thanks to the audience for everyone.
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming. And please feel free to continue sending us questions. Like, we'll answer them in future.
And I'm sorry I didn't get to everything. Some of the stuff was pretty far off topic. So I didn't
get to see. I'm still figuring out how to live stream. Yeah. This is the first time I've live streamed to my own channel, like my second time live streaming in general. And so I'm still figuring out how I haven't even seen. I don't even know if any of my community attended. I don't know how to know. So yeah.
Okay.
I'll have to figure it out.
All right. See everyone next time.
Thank you, 0 Point Energy. Thank you. Bye-bye.